Blood spattered across cream-colored walls. A heavy brass candlestick lying on expensive carpet. And at the center of the living room in Crescent Ridge's most respected household, the body of Victor Hartwell, successful businessman, community pillar, and family man. But Victor was no ordinary victim. And this was no ordinary crime. I had to stop him. He destroyed everything. Everything. These were the first words Margaret Hartwell spoke to police after calling them to her home on that stormy night. The devoted wife, compassionate nurse, and loving mother stood over her husband's body, hands trembling but voice steady. What drives a woman who dedicated her life to healing others to commit such violence? The answer lies in a betrayal so profound, so devastating. It shattered every foundation of trust Margaret believed in. Have you ever wondered what your breaking point might be? That threshold where loyalty transforms into rage. When the people you trust most violate every boundary you thought sacred. For Margaret Hartwell, that moment came with two devastating revelations. Her husband hadn't just betrayed her with one woman in her family. He had committed an unconscionable double violation that few could fathom. 2 pregnancies, 2 lives forever altered, 1 household destroyed beyond recognition. Before I reveal the shocking details of how Victor Hartwell impregnated both his sister-in-law and his teenage daughter under the same roof, take a moment to subscribe to True Crime Village. Hit that notification bell because this case exposes the darkest corners of family betrayal and the devastating consequences when trust is obliterated by the person sworn to protect it. What would you do if the sanctuary of your home became the scene of your worst nightmare? Crescent Ridge sparkled as the model American suburb. Pristine lawns, elegant homes, and neighbors who waved with genuine smiles. Among these idyllic streets, the Hartwell residence stood as a testament to achievement and family values. The 2-story colonial with white columns and wraparound porch wasn't just a house. It was a statement of success. Margaret Hartwell moved through the community like a quiet guardian angel. At Mercy General Hospital, colleagues described her as the nurse you'd want if your life depended on it. Patients requested her by name. Her gentle touch and unwavering composure made her legendary in the pediatric ward, where she specialized in caring for the most vulnerable children. Margaret never raised her voice, recalled her neighbor of 15 years. She could defuse any situation with just a few words. We all wished we had her patience with our own kids. At home, Margaret maintained the same level of dedication. She guided her 18-year-old daughter Lila through the turbulent waters of adolescence with steadfast support. Her son Tyler, 2 years younger, benefited from her balanced approach to discipline and nurturing. Victor Hartwell commanded attention whenever he entered a room. His construction company had transformed the county's skyline with innovative commercial buildings and luxury homes. The magnetic charm that attracted clients to his business served him equally well in social circles. Community leaders sought his input, charities pursued his donations, and neighbors coveted invitations to the Hartwells' summer barbecues. Victor knew everyone's name, their children's names, even their pets' names, one business associate noted. He made you feel like the most important person in the world when he spoke to you. Together, they projected an image of marital harmony built on mutual respect and shared goals. Their anniversary parties became annual events that neighbors marked on their calendars months in advance. This carefully constructed world shifted when Celeste Monroe arrived with 3 suitcases and fractured confidence. Margaret's younger sister, striking, vivacious, and newly divorced, moved into the guest bedroom, just until I get back on my feet. The temporary arrangement stretched from weeks into months. Where Margaret was soft-spoken, Celeste bubbled with energy. Where Margaret chose neutral tones, Celeste wore vibrant colors. The sisters complemented each other in ways that initially strengthened the household. Few noticed how Victor's gaze lingered on Celeste during family dinners. Fewer still caught the subtle shift in his attention. How he'd suddenly appear in rooms where Celeste worked alone, offering help that wasn't needed. The casual touches on her shoulder when passing. The private jokes that excluded others. Margaret noticed, but dismissed the observations as her imagination. And wasn't that why Victor was so successful? His ability to make everyone feel special? When Celeste began avoiding Margaret's eyes during conversation, when Lila grew increasingly withdrawn at family gatherings, when Victor started working late with unexpected frequency. These moments slipped by as minor anomalies in an otherwise flawless family portrait. The warning signs were there, written in invisible ink, waiting for the heat of conflict to expose them. The change in Victor's behavior began subtly, almost imperceptibly. A lingering glance at breakfast. A compliment about Celeste's dress that lasted a beat too long. The way he'd find reasons to be in the kitchen when she was cooking or appear in the hallway just as she emerged from the bathroom. "You look more like yourself every day," he told Celeste one evening when Margaret worked a night shift. "Your ex never appreciated what he had." For Celeste, these words acted like rain on parched soil. Her divorce had left her questioning her worth, her attractiveness, her future. Each validation from Victor, successful, confident Victor, helped rebuild what her ex-husband had methodically torn down over years of emotional neglect. "I just need someone who understands what I'm going through," Celeste confided to her journal. "And Victor listens in ways my therapist doesn't." Their conversations evolved from casual family chat to deeply personal exchanges. Victor strategically revealed vulnerabilities, fabricated tensions with Margaret, invented frustrations about his marriage, creating false intimacy that mirrored Celeste's authentic disclosures. "Margaret and I haven't really connected in years," he lied one night, voice lowered in the darkness of the back porch. "She doesn't understand the pressures I face." By month 3 of Celeste's stay, Victor had established a pattern. Text messages during work hours, brief, accidental encounters in isolated parts of the house, and conversations that increasingly hinted at attraction. The architect of commercial empires was equally skilled at constructing emotional labyrinths. "I shouldn't feel this way," he would say, masterfully positioning himself as both pursuer and victim. "But I can't help it when I'm around you." Their first kiss happened in the garden shed during a family barbecue. Their first sexual encounter occurred in Victor's office after hours, when he claimed to show Celeste investment opportunities. Each time, he engineered scenarios where they were alone, where the risk amplified the excitement. "No one understands you like I do," became his mantra, isolating Celeste from potential support systems, particularly Margaret. "This is between us. Margaret wouldn't comprehend what we have." For Celeste, the affair offered validation, passion, and the intoxicating feeling of being chosen. The guilt she experienced was real but easily overshadowed by Victor's persistent attention and the chemical rush of forbidden connection. 6 months into their affair, Celeste stared at a positive pregnancy test in the guest bathroom, her heart racing with conflicting emotions. How could she tell Victor? What would this mean for her relationship with Margaret? How could she have allowed this to happen? Have you ever witnessed someone being manipulated and remained silent? Those moments when you recognize the calculated moves, the strategic words, the artificial intimacy, but say nothing? What prevents us from intervening when we see the warning signs of emotional exploitation happening right before our eyes? When Celeste finally gathered the courage to tell Victor about the pregnancy, his reaction would reveal the true nature of his love and set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to his death. While Victor orchestrated his affair with Celeste, another devastating betrayal unfolded within the Hartwell home, one far more destructive and morally reprehensible. Lila Hartwell had always been Daddy's little girl. As a child, she'd run to the door when Victor returned from work, eager for his approval and affection. That natural desire for paternal validation created the perfect foundation for exploitation as she entered her teenage years. At 18, Lila struggled with the pressures of maintaining her family's perfect image. College applications, social expectations, and her own budding identity created a storm of insecurities. Victor recognized this vulnerability and methodically exploited it. "You're not like other girls your age," he told her repeatedly. "You're special, more mature." These statements, seemingly innocent to outsiders, were calculated steps in dismantling appropriate boundaries. Victor increased physical contact gradually. A hand on her shoulder became a kiss on the forehead, which eventually transformed into longer embraces. He isolated her through special father-daughter time that excluded Margaret and her brother. "Your mother wouldn't understand our connection," he whispered during these private moments. "We have something unique." The psychological manipulation intensified as Victor positioned himself as Lila's primary confidant. He discouraged her friendships, criticized potential romantic interests, and gradually convinced her that their inappropriate relationship was an expression of unique affection rather than abuse. "This is how fathers and daughters who truly love each other express their bond," he told her, normalizing acts that violated every ethical and legal boundary. For Lila, the consequences were devastating. Her journal entries revealed increasing confusion, shame, and psychological fracturing. She withdrew from friends, her academic performance plummeted, and anxiety attacks became frequent occurrences. "I feel hollow inside," she wrote, "like I'm watching myself from outside my body when he touches me. Is this love? It doesn't feel like the love I imagined." The discovery of Lila's pregnancy occurred during a routine physical required for college admission. The doctor, noticing irregularities in her examination responses, requested private time with the teenager. In that sterile exam room, Lila's secret spilled forth like a dam breaking, the weight of months of abuse finally finding release. Pause. The statistics on familial sexual abuse remain among the most disturbing in criminal psychology. Research shows that 34% of perpetrators who sexually abuse children are family members. These cases have the lowest reporting rates of all abuse categories, with an estimated 73% never reported to authorities. The manipulation is so thorough that many victims don't recognize their abuse as abuse until years later, if ever. Has someone in your life displayed these warning signs with a young person? Excessive private time together, inappropriate comments about physical development, jealousy about the victim's relationships with peers, providing special privileges contingent on physical affection? Leave a comment below about warning signs you've witnessed that others missed. Your insight might help someone identify abuse happening right now. When the doctor legally reported Lila's situation, the authorities moved quickly, but they were unaware of the parallel situation developing with Celeste, a convergence of betrayals that would soon explode into violence. Lila's pregnancy confirmation came just 3 days after Celeste had revealed her own condition to Victor. His calculated response to both women demonstrated the depth of his pathology and set the stage for the final confrontation that would end his life. The evening began like countless others in the Hartwell home. Margaret returned from her hospital shift, exhausted but fulfilled. The house was quiet. Victor claimed to be working late, Tyler was at basketball practice, and Lila had sequestered herself in her bedroom, a common occurrence these past months. Only Celeste moved through the kitchen, her face drawn with worry as she prepared tea with trembling hands. Margaret noticed her sister's unusual pallor but attributed it to the lingering effects of her divorce. Some wounds required time to heal. Margaret retreated to her bedroom to change clothes when muffled sobs from the guest room caught her attention. Through the partially open door, she heard Celeste's voice, broken and desperate, on a phone call. "I can't hide it much longer." "What do you mean, handle it?" "This is a baby, Victor, not a problem to solve." The mention of her husband's name froze Margaret in place. The words baby and hide echoed in her mind, connecting dots she'd subconsciously been avoiding for months. "She's my sister," Celeste continued, unaware of Margaret's presence. "You promised we would tell her together. You swore this wasn't just—" Margaret pushed the door open. Celeste dropped the phone, her face collapsing into an expression of pure terror and shame. "How long?" Margaret asked, her voice unnaturally calm. The confession poured from Celeste like blood from a wound. 6 months of deception, promises of love, plans Victor had made for their future together. Each word struck Margaret like physical blows. "He said your marriage was empty," Celeste whispered, "that you stayed together for appearances." The hospital called Margaret 2 hours later with information that shattered what remained of her world. A doctor requested permission to discuss Lila's confidential medical information, citing family welfare concerns. The pregnancy test had come back positive. During mandatory counseling, Lila had named her father as the baby's father. Margaret hung up the phone and vomited into the kitchen sink. When Victor returned home near midnight, he found his wife and sister-in-law waiting in the living room. The air felt charged with electricity, dangerous and volatile. "The hospital called," Margaret said, "and Celeste told me everything." Victor's response revealed his true character. Rather than contrition, he displayed calculated manipulation. His expression shifted from surprise to wounded innocence with practiced precision. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted, voice dropping to the gentle tone he used with difficult clients. "Celeste has been emotionally fragile since her divorce. She misinterpreted my kindness." When confronted with Lila's pregnancy, Victor's strategy morphed into offensive defense. "She's been acting out for attention," he claimed, "fabricating stories to punish me for setting boundaries on her behavior. You know how dramatic teenagers can be." As Margaret watched her husband deny both violations with practiced ease, something fundamental changed within her. The disbelief that had numbed her initially crystallized into clarity. The shock transformed into white-hot rage. "Our daughter," Margaret whispered. "Our 18-year-old daughter. You manipulated and violated our daughter." Victor's response was perhaps most damning of all. He laughed. A short, dismissive chuckle that communicated his belief that he would escape consequences, as he always had. "Who will believe either of them over me?" he asked. "A divorced woman desperate for stability and a teenage girl with a history of emotional problems? Be reasonable, Margaret." In that moment, watching him calculate his escape from accountability, Margaret understood that Victor viewed his wife, daughter, and sister-in-law not as people to love but as objects to control. Their pain meant nothing. Their lives were collateral damage to his desires. The walls of their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison documenting years of lies. Family photos mocked her with frozen smiles that masked ongoing betrayal. 2 pregnancies, 2 shattered lives. And Victor stood before her, confident in his ability to manipulate his way out of consequences. If you discovered that the person you trusted most had betrayed not just your marriage but had violated your child, what would be your breaking point? At what moment would protection override civilization's rules? When does rage become justified in the face of monstrous betrayal? For Margaret Hartwell, that moment had arrived. Thunder crashed outside the Hartwell home as rain lashed against the windows with violent force. Nature's fury mirrored the emotional tempest within the living room, where Margaret stood facing her husband, her body rigid with contained rage. "You need to leave this house tonight," Margaret said, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Pack your things and go." Victor lounged on the leather sofa, his posture relaxed despite the gravity of the moment. The same confident smile that had charmed clients and community leaders now appeared on his face. A smile that assumed control, that predicted victory. "Don't be absurd," he replied, checking his watch. "Where would I go in this weather? Besides, this is my house. My name on the mortgage." Lightning illuminated the room in harsh white flashes, casting stark shadows across Victor's face. In these momentary bursts of light, Margaret saw something she'd never fully recognized before. The cold calculation behind his eyes, the complete absence of remorse. "They're pregnant, Victor. Your daughter and my sister are carrying your children." Victor stood and poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the sidebar. The casual nature of his movements, as if they were discussing a minor disagreement about dinner plans, pushed Margaret closer to the edge. "These accusations are ridiculous," he said, sipping his bourbon. "But if you insist on believing them, we can discuss this with our lawyers tomorrow. I won't be driven from my home by hysteria." The word hysteria struck Margaret like a physical blow. 20 years of medical training had taught her about gaslighting, about how abusers invalidate emotions to maintain control. 20 years of marriage had conditioned her to doubt herself when Victor dismissed her concerns. "Not this time." "Look at me," Margaret demanded. When Victor turned, she held up her phone displaying hospital records. Lila's pregnancy test, the counselor's report, her statement naming you as the father. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victor's face. Then his expression hardened. "She's lying, and if you support this delusion, you're betraying me." After everything I've provided for this family. Margaret's hand closed around the heavy brass candlestick on the mantel. The weight of it felt right somehow. Grounding. You violated our daughter, she whispered. Victor laughed. A short, dismissive sound that echoed through the room. That laugh severed the final thread of Margaret's restraint. The first blow caught him by surprise, connecting with his temple with a sickening crack. He stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock rather than pain. The second strike sent him to the floor. The third ensured he wouldn't rise again. Blood pooled on the cream-colored carpet, spreading in an expanding circle. The candlestick slipped from Margaret's fingers, landing beside Victor's body with a dull thud. Celeste found them first, drawn downstairs by the commotion. Her scream brought Lila running. The three women formed a tableau around Victor's body. Margaret standing motionless, Celeste pressing herself against the wall, and Lila frozen in the doorway, one hand protectively covering her stomach. "He can't hurt you anymore," Margaret said to her daughter, her nurse's training automatically assessing that Victor was beyond medical intervention. "He can't hurt any of us." The storm continued its assault on the house as Margaret walked calmly to the phone and dialed 911. Blood dotted her clothes like crimson constellations. The candlestick lay on the floor, its ornate handle now slick with evidence of a family's final breaking point. When police arrived at the Hartwell residence, they found Margaret seated calmly in the foyer, hands folded in her lap. "I killed my husband," she stated without emotion. "He's in the living room." The quiet suburb transformed overnight as news vans lined the streets and reporters broadcast from the Hartwell lawn. Neighbors who once admired the family now provided contradictory sound bites. They seemed so perfect, competed with, "I always felt something was off about him." Social media exploded with divided opinions. Hashtag Justice for Victor trended alongside hashtag Stand with Margaret. The case ignited fierce debates about vigilante justice, with commentators asking whether Margaret's actions were justified given the horrific nature of Victor's violations. The trial began 6 months later. The courthouse overflowed daily with spectators and press. Margaret's defense attorney pursued a strategy combining temporary insanity with extreme emotional distress, presenting extensive evidence of Victor's psychological manipulation and abuse. "My client discovered not only marital infidelity but the sexual abuse of her teenage daughter," the defense argued. Any parent would experience psychological fracture upon such discovery. The prosecution painted Margaret as calculating, highlighting the brutality of the attack and arguing that calling authorities would have been the proper response. The most damaging testimony came from Lila herself. Now visibly pregnant, she described years of grooming and manipulation by her father. Medical experts confirmed the paternity. Celeste corroborated the pattern of manipulation, revealing Victor's identical tactics used on both women. "He told me I was special." Both women testified separately, unaware they'd been fed identical lines. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning with their verdict: guilty of voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. The judge, acknowledging the extraordinary circumstances, sentenced Margaret to 15 years with possibility of parole after 7. As Margaret was led from the courtroom, public opinion remained sharply divided between those who viewed her as a monster and those who saw her as a mother who sacrificed herself to protect her child. Celeste left Crescent Ridge immediately after the trial. She relocated to Arizona where she gave birth to a daughter. Records indicate she legally changed both their surnames, attempting to outrun the shadow of scandal. She declined all interview requests and has maintained complete privacy. Lila's path proved more complex. Despite pressure to terminate her pregnancy, she chose to keep her child. "This baby is innocent," she told the court. "Breaking cycles of abuse means making difficult choices." With support from extended family, she entered intensive therapy while pursuing a degree in psychology, determined to understand and heal from her trauma. Was justice truly served in the Hartwell case? If the legal system had handled Victor's crimes, would he have received adequate punishment for his violations? Or did Margaret deliver the only justice that could match the magnitude of his betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments about where justice ends and vengeance begins in cases of family abuse. Does our legal system adequately protect victims of intimate betrayal? Crescent Ridge never recovered its illusion of perfection. A decade later, residents still reference time as before the Hartwell case or after the Hartwell case. The colonial house with white columns remained vacant for years, a physical reminder that facades often mask devastating realities. The psychological aftermath extends beyond those directly involved. Communities built on surface-level interactions often miss critical signs of abuse. The Hartwell tragedy teaches us that charm can be weaponized, that manipulators identify vulnerability with precision, and that those closest to us sometimes cause the deepest wounds. Margaret's actions exist in a gray area where moral absolutes collapse. Was she a cold-blooded killer or a protective mother? A vigilante or a victim pushed beyond human endurance? Perhaps she embodies all these contradictions simultaneously, the complexity that defines genuine human tragedy. Betrayal exacts prices beyond the immediate damage. Two children grow up with the burden of their origins. Community loses its innocence. A woman spends years behind bars. The ripples continue outward, touching countless lives with their cautionary message. What can we learn? Trust should be verified, not blindly given. Isolation is often the first strategy of abusers. Dramatic personality changes in loved ones warrant attention. Most importantly, we must create environments where victims can speak without judgment. If this case resonated with you, please like this video and share it to raise awareness about familial abuse. Subscribe to True Crime Village for cases that challenge our understanding of justice and human behavior. Next week, the shocking case of a respected school principal who maintained two separate families in neighboring towns for 15 years, until a chance encounter at a grocery store exposed everything.